IOD molds are silicone maker tools that have detailed cavities for creating castings to apply to your decorative projects.
There's a lot of different silicone molds available on the market, but ours are the best. And a few of the things that make them the most innovative are, for example, our measure marks in 2 units so that whether you're using liquid or solid mediums, you can measure ahead of time and know about how much you'll need, as well as our famous micro rim. And those allow you to more easily get a really clean edge on your casting.
For today's demonstration, we are going to be using our Trimmings 2 mold, our Classic Elements mold, a wood blank, and our IOD Air Dry Clay.
The IOD Air Dry Clay is the highest artist quality, which means it's going to keep more of your detail and it's going to minimize the shrinkage.
We like to prep our molds with just a little bit of a powdering of cornstarch. You don't have to do this, but we find that it just makes the release easy, and the easier your release is, the less it will distort your casting. One thing to keep in mind when you're using the IOD Air Dry Clay or any air dry clay, be sure to keep it covered during the use, otherwise it'll dry out. So I just broke off a little chunk here and I'm just gonna press it in using the micro rim to get that nice clean edge. You wanna keep the surface of it nice and flat, so keep that in mind as you're working that cavity. And then demold. And you have a beautiful detailed casting. And this is why you wanted that flat surface. When we go to glue it onto its surface, you have as much adhesion surface as possible because it's flat to where you're putting it on your project. Go ahead and lay them in place as you are doing your castings so you kind of have your composition happening as you're going. When we're working with our castings, we actually like to use Titebond Quick and Thick. The thickness of it allows you to work even on a vertical surface. So that's one of the things we like about it. So I have squirted some in this little container here, and I'm just gonna use this applicator to give a nice, thorough, but not too thick coat, thank you.
It's also worth noting that there's multiple ways of doing this. You can wait for your castings to dry as long as you've got them on a flat surface while they're drying so that they are still flat after they've dried, and then glue them down. We're doing it while they're still wet because we love how it makes them really conform to the surface.
When you're gluing on your casting, you want to be sure to be really gentle because when it is still wet, it can warp.
And that's one of the caveats of gluing them down while they're still wet.
Now we've applied all of our castings and we've allowed this to dry overnight, and now we're going to paint it.
If you chose to paint it before it's dry, that slows down the drying time a little bit, and it makes it so that you do need to be extra gentle with your brush. Maybe use one of the really feathery brushes so that you don't ruin your detail. But the upside is that it actually, in slowing down that drying time, causes it to minimize your cracking. In this case, we do have some cracking, but this is great because we're going to show you exactly how to deal with it. So you're just going to take a little bit more of your air dry clay and you're going to squish it into the spot. And I'm using a standard clay, silicone tipped clay tool to mold it to the gap and remove the excess.
Sometimes I just use my finger.
You can just use your finger as well. The nice thing about a silicone tool like this is it can get into the little tiny spots, right, that your fingers can't really get into.
True, true. So we have filled all of the gaps and we are ready to get started with painting this demo board. The nice thing about having the castings be dry is that you don't have to be as delicate when you're painting around them.
This is fully painted and thoroughly dried. And now we're just going to go in with a very diluted mix of chalk paint and water and apply a light glaze technique to pop that detail. This is about 1 part chalk paint to 6 parts water, but that's not an exact science, and you can adjust that depending on your project needs. We're going to apply that loosely, and then we're going to soften it and lift it back up with a damp, actually quite damp, soft cloth.
And there are a lot of different ways to pop the detail of your molded projects. There are colored waxes. You can go on with a clear wax and then a colored wax. And there's also gilding pastes and white wax. I mean, it is really, you just have to get out there and explore because there's a lot of fun ways to really bring out all of the beautiful, delicious detail in an IOD mold.
So as you can see, adding that last step of a color wash really amplifies the details for your project and gives it that vintage old world patina.
We've shown you the most common way to use our molds. However, you can use them with resins, polymer clay, and so much more. Make sure you go to our YouTube channel and search under molds on our playlist.